Pokky Man by Mark Laidlaw. A film by Werner Herzog. Werner Herzog, filmmaker. In 2004, I was contacted by Digito of America to review some film footage they had acquired in litigation with the estate of a young Poképet master named Hemlock Pine. While I have occasionally played board games such as Parcheesi and various pen and paper role-playing games involving dwarves and wizards, in vain hopes of escaping the nightmare ordeals that infest my soul, I was hardly the target audience for the global phenomenon of Poképets. I knew only the bare lineaments of the young man's story, namely that he had been at one time considered the greatest captor of Poképets the world had ever known. Few of these rare yet paradoxically ubiquitous creatures had escaped being added to his collection. But he had turned against his fellow trainers, who now hurled at him the sort of venom and resentment usually reserved for race traitors. The childish, even cartoonish aspects of the story were far from appealing to me, especially as spending time on 100 or so hours of Poképet footage would mean delaying my then unfunded cinematic paean to those dedicated paleoanthropologists who study human coprolites or fossil feces. But there was an element of treachery and tragedy that lured me to look more carefully at the life and last days of Hemlock Pine, as well as the amount of money Digito was offering. I found the combination irresistible. Hemlock Pine, Pokemaster.
To be a Pokécaptor was for me the highest calling. The highest calling. I never dreamed of wanting anything else. All through my childhood, I trained for it. It was a kind of warrior celebration, a Pokebration, you might say, of the warrior spirit. I lived, ate, breathed, drank, even pooped the Poké spirit. Yes, pooped, because there's dignity in everything they do. When it comes to Poképets, there is no room for shame, not even in pooping. In a sense, I was no different from many, many other children who dream of being Pokécaptors. The only difference between me and you, children like you who might be watching this, is that I didn't give up on my dream. Maybe it's because I was such a loser in every other part of my life? Yeah, imagine that. I know. It's difficult, right? But I managed to pull myself free of all those other bonds and throw myself completely into the world of Poképets. And I don't care who you are or where you are, but that is still possible today.
Werner Herzog. Hemlock Pine's natural enthusiasm connected him ineluctably with the childish world of Poképets, the world he never really escaped. The more I studied his footage, the more I saw a boy trapped inside a gawky man-child's body. It was no wonder to me that he had such difficulty relating to the demands of the adult world. In cleaving to his pre-juvenile addictions, it was clear that Pine hoped to escape his own decay, and for this reason threw himself completely into a world that seems on its face eternal and unchanging. The irony is that in pursuing a childish wonderland, he penetrated the barrier that protects our fragile grasp on sanity by keeping us from seeing too much of the void that underlines the lurid cartoons of corporate consumer culture as they caper in a crazed dumb show above the abyss. Peter Yalp, actor.
I think we knew and assumed Hemlock knew where this was probably heading. And it's hard to see a person you care for, friend of many years, make the sorts of decisions he made that put him ever deeper into danger. It didn't really help to know that it was all he cared for, that all this danger was justified in a way by passion, by love. And when you saw him light up from talking about it, it was hard to argue. He'd never had anything like that in his life. I mean, he'd been through a lot. Coming back to Poképets, sure, it seemed childish at first, but he was so disconnected from everything anyway. We had to root for him, you know? But we still feared for him. He never did anything halfway, you know? Whenever he started anything, you always knew he was going to push it past any extreme you could imagine. So it was only sort of a shock, but more of a dreaded confirmation when we heard the news. I remember I was in the kitchen nuking some popcorn for dinner, and the kids were watching Poképets on, the Poképets network. And then our youngest said, "Look, it's Uncle Hemlock." Which seemed weird at first, because why would he be on their cartoon? But then I saw it was the Poképets Evening News, and even though the sound was turned up full, I found I couldn't hear what the anchorman was saying. I just stared at the picture of Hemlock they'd put up there, the most famous shot of him crouched in the Poke Maze, letting an injured chickapork out of a Pokeball. And from the way the camera slowly zoomed back from the photo, I knew right then he wouldn't be coming back to us this time.
Augustine Gust Masters, seaplane pilot.
I was friends with him for years and years. Used to fly him out here to the Poke Maze in midsummer, come and collect him before fall settled in. I'd check in from time to time to see how he was doing and drop off the occasional supply. He was a special sort of guy, and there won't never be another like him. One thing, he was fearless, as you can imagine he'd have to be, try living right here like he did. From where we're standing, you can watch the migratory routes of about 150 different types of Pokepets. Everything from the super common peck sniffs, to the gold and silver specials, to the uniques like Abyssoid, who comes up out of this here lake once a year for about 30 seconds at 8:37 a.m. on September 9. And that's only if the 9th happens to fall on a Tuesday. Really, it's a captor's dream, or would be if it wasn't a preserve. Him came out here every year and never once tried to capture or collect a single one of the Pokies. In fact, they were more likely to collect him. He got adopted by Chickapork to the extent you couldn't tell who belonged to who. Anyway, he made it a point of pride that he never carried a Pokeball, that he was here to protect the Pokepets, protect them from being collected. When he was young, he was a heck of a captor, but once he put that aside, that was it. He didn't try charming them with flutes or putting them to sleep. He didn't freeze or paralyze them with any of Professor Sequoia's dust infusion or thunderwhack a single one. He came out here empty-handed and tried to make a pokey out of himself, I guess. If I had to pick one thing, I'd say that right there was his undoing. That and Surly Man.
Werner Herzog. What others saw as evidence of everything from low self-image to schizophrenia was to Hemlock Pine nothing more than a kind of dramatic stage lighting, necessary to cast an imposing shadow over a world that considered him but a small-time actor in a community theater production. It did not matter to the rest of the world that in this tawdry play, Hemlock Pine had the leading role. But to Pine himself, nothing else mattered. He had cast himself in the part of the renegade captor who would give himself completely to his beloved pets. That it was to be a tragic role, I suspect would not have stopped him, and while he seems to have had premonitions of his fate, he could have asked any number of those who spent their lives working in and around the Poke Range, and have heard many predictions that would end up remarkably close to his eventual outcome. Gust Masters.
Right here is where I came in from my usual rendezvous at the appointed time, ready to take him up out of here. First I thought maybe I had the day wrong, because usually I'd expect him to see with all his gear packed up and waiting here on the shore. It was later in the year than he'd ever stayed, not our usual date, so I thought it was my mistake, and I went hollering up the hillside trail here toward his camp, figuring maybe he could use a hand packing up his stuff. And halfway up the trail here, I got a really funny feeling. Not a nice feeling at all. I never travel here without a few extra Pokeballs and some coma flakes. I mean, I'm no Hemlock. I come prepared for anything. And I was just freeing up a Pokeball in case I had to make an emergency capture when I heard this grumbling in the brush off to the side of the trail. Very clearly, I could hear a big old Pokepet crawling around in there, just saying its name over and over again. So there's no mistaking what I was up against, going, Surly, Surly, like that. Just a nasty old Pokey saying its name like a warning, that one bad note over and over again. Well, I don't mind saying it scared me, and I forgot about trying to catch it, since that's a tough one to collect even if you're fully prepared. I didn't have any Pokepets of my own to back me up, so I hightailed it back to the plane and took off, just cold and sweating. My gut's full of ice water, you know. Tried to get Hemlock on his radio a couple times, but no answer there, and I was starting to believe we weren't going to get any more answers at all. I brought the plane in low over the maze, low as I could. And the way Hem would hide his tent in the trees, I knew it'd be hard to get a clear picture of what was going on there. But as I was flying over, the wind swept over pretty hard. Banked me a bit just as it was parting the trees around his campsite, and I got one clear look I'll never forget. Right below me, the tent had been flattened out, so the poles were sticking up out of it. Gear was scattered everywhere. Clothes, camera equipment, pots and pans, and hemlock was scattered everywhere too, in and around the tent. I hardly knew what I was seeing. His head staring up at me on the other side of the sight from his chest, an arm here, a leg there. I couldn't tell if his eyes were open, but I didn't see how they could be. I figured he had to be sleeping after an attack like that. I knew I'd need help getting him out of there, so I banked into the wind and headed back to town.
Hemlock Pine, 10 days before the end.
This is Surly-Mon. He's a very old Pokepet, and we're just getting to know each other. I'm not usually here in the Pokemaze this late in the year, but I had a little upset at the airport and decided I was not ready to leave my Poke friends just yet to return to all the bull poop and the hassle of poopy humans back in the so-called real world. Just wasn't ready. So here I am, and some of my old friends seem to have moved on, and some new Pokies have moved in. It's the migratory time, you see, all a completely natural part of the Pokepet cycle, and pretty exciting to see it in action. Not to say that there isn't danger here, there's plenty of it, but that's what keeps me going. Nobody else could do what I do, give themselves to the protection of the Pokepets the way I do, and they respect me for it. They know that I have the best of intentions, that I'd be one of them if I could. But in the meantime, I'm getting to know Surly-Mon here, getting to earn his trust. Isn't that right, Surly-Mon? We're getting to know each other. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Now, hey, watch it. Back off. That is not cool, Surly-Mon, not cool. Good Pokey. Okay, good old Pokey. Yes, you're a good old boy. I know. I love you. I'm sorry I had to snap at you like that. I'm Hemlock, okay? Hemlock. I love you. Hemlock loves you. Hemlock.
Augustus Justice Peace, helicopter pilot.
I've known Gust for years and years, and through him I knew Hemlock Pine, though we weren't what you'd call close. That day he came back with news about Hemlock's troubles. I could tell he'd seen something nobody should see. Well, we called the Poke Park Service, which is basically every other person around here, and we got 3 captors together, and I took us out in the chopper. We landed on Baldymon Hill, which overlooks the Pokemaze, and they went on down there while I kept an eye on the chopper, ready to light out at a moment's notice. I could hear 'em when they caught up with the Surly-Mon. They had some pretty tough pets with them, but that son-bitch was tough. It took all 3 captors in full Poke battle, and each one of them used at least 3 Pokeballs, setting their own pets on the Surly-Mon. It took 8 Pokepets to wear down that Surly-Mon. I think the final attack was a full-on Typhon Crash Mastery move, and then the Surly-Mon finally went into slumber. It was only then that the thing was vulnerable and they could poach it. I heard all this, mind, I didn't see any of it, but I'll tell you, every time I heard that thing giving out its call, my blood ran cold. Surly. Well, I can't do it. It was a horrible sound, though. When they finally came crashing through the underbrush, dragging the Pokeball, with their own poor little pets limping along behind, the captors looked like they'd been involved in the struggle themselves, and I don't mean psychically. Then it was over to me and Gust. He led me back down the hill and into the maze to the campsite, and there was Hemlock Pine in a dozen pieces. He was weird and awful. Gust called his name a few times, trying to wake him up, because we didn't really realize the extent of it yet. It was asleep like nothing we'd ever seen. I had some sudden stir powder with me, and I sprinkled it in his eyes, but it didn't do a thing. And I never seen a Pokepet or captor yet who could sleep through that stuff. After a while, we decided we'd best get him to town to the Poke Clinic, so we gathered up the pieces. Filled 4 Pokeballs with the parts. That was all we had to carry him in.
Madrona Sequoia, friend, Pokecologist.
What Hemlock wanted was a way to mutate into a Pokepet himself. He was very, very uncomfortable being in his own skin, especially when it meant he was a captor or master of Pokepets. He wanted to merge with the Pokies, become one of them, share in their alchemic process. Hemlock sensed a transformative power in them, and he wanted this for himself. When he was studying with me, we went through the triadic life cycle of the typical healthy Pokepet, following its course in many, many creatures. When he first went out into the Poke range with the idea of studying and protecting the pets, he placed himself in the habitat of the Pigletta. It was a good fit for him since they're such friendly creatures, but his ulterior motive was to bond so closely with one that it would allow him to stay with it through all its transformations. Of course, everyone who adopts a Pigletta feels that theirs is special and that they have a unique friendship, but in Hemlock's case, I think there is a real argument for this. After all, he had stopped collecting at that point. He never stunned his Pokepet or trapped it even briefly in a Pokeball to subdue it. He made friends with it as if he were another of its kind, and in his second summer back there, he was witness to its first transition into Chickapork. I know how much Hemlock wanted to see the final change to Borax, which sadly took place in the autumn immediately after Surlimon, so he missed it. This, as I say, was a spiritual quest for him, and he welcomed its transformative intensity from the first, even though in the eyes of other Pokepet captors he immediately went from role model to traitor. This was when people started saying he was crazy, sending nasty letters, even making threats. This is when the Missile Kids stepped up their attacks on his character. It got harder and harder for me to bear, but Hemlock said to pay it no mind. It didn't bother him. The only thing that bothered him anymore was any sort of threat to his beloved Pokepets.
Werner Herzog. At the same time that Hemlock Pine was alienating his former worshippers, he was winning for himself a new audience that would one day be captivated by his insights and his breathtaking cinematic records of his life among the Pokepets, a life that few have ever attempted, let alone accomplished. Going through his films, I found him to have possessed an innate genius, not only for capturing Pokepets, but for capturing moments of pure cinema. Here we see Pine in his early summer campsite, a spot he pitched between the dens of burrowing Chickaporks so that he could live among the frolicking Piglettas. Hemlock Pine.
This is Chickapork, my Chickapork. We're longtime buddies, aren't we? Yes, we are. Chickapork is my most beloved Pokepet, and it's really important to understand that we are mutual friends. I do not own him. I did not capture him. I have never imprisoned him in a Pokeball. So you see, it is possible for us to have a harmonious relationship with these beautiful creatures without having to... Hey, this is Pigletta. This is one of Chickapork's offspring, or little sibs. I'm not sure exactly. Hey, where are you going with my cap? Come back with that cap, Pigletta. That is a very important cap. That was a gift from Professor Manzanita. Oh, God. Oh, no. A lot depends on that cap, Pigletta. Give me back my cap. Where's my fucking Pokemaster cap?
Professor Manzanita, Pokepet expert.
In the field, it was obvious that he wanted nothing more than to be a Pokepet. He would act just like them. The simple, continual act of stating his identity with such clarity, this thing that the Pokepets do incessantly, Hemlock adopted this behavior. If you went out to visit him in the field, or if you were an unsuspecting captor who came across him, Hem would act as if human language and human behavior were completely unknown to him. He would just say his name at you over and over like a Pokepet. His mantra, his active affirmation, Hemlock, Hemlock, Hemlock. He saw the Pokeworld as a rare and simplified place, everything streamlined and stripped down to this one act of self-naming. That world had a siren's allure for him, but that world simply did not exist. The truth was far more complex.
Tega Moss, curator, Poke National Wilderness Museum.
I'm afraid that although Hemlock Pine might be a hero to some people, to us he seems simply deluded. Our relationship with the Pokepets goes back tens of thousands of years, to when we believed the Pokies and people shared this land. We treated each other with respect, and we have done so throughout our history. We created the original Pokeballs, and we captured and collected the first Pokepets to be captured and collected. We held the first Poke battles. Those rituals are very ancient.
the result of the relationship between man and Pokepet. So there is a very long tradition of understanding between our people and the Poke people. I would say that what Hemlock did was the ultimate disrespect. In living among the Poke, in treating them as cute cartoon characters, he crossed a boundary and paid the price. The ultimate price. There's a reason he will not wake up, and honestly, we don't expect him to. I think a lot of people are in denial about the sort of trouble he caused for himself, and really for all of us, because I don't know if it will stop with Hemlock. There's always been this barrier from time long past, and he damaged it, irretrievably. It's plain to see if you'll just look at him. Truly look at him for once.
Jasper Chrysolite, Poke Clinic. We're here in cold storage at the Poke Clinic because, quite simply, this is the only place we've been able to arrest the very strange and terrible processes that have hemlock pine in their grip. In those steel drawers behind me, if I were to open them, you would see hemlock pine much as he was when they brought him into me for revival. As you already know, I was unable to wake him, even with the finest waking compounds at my disposal. I say much as he was because Hemlock did not stay as he was in those first hours. The separate parts of him lost their normal color. Some began to swell, others to wither, and there was a terrible odor associated with him which I would rather not go into. Whatever this process is, some sort of Poke contagion he caught from Surlymon or elsewhere in the Pokemaze, I had a sort of hunch that extreme cold might arrest it, and so we arranged for some cold storage, which has indeed seemed to do the trick. We will, of course, keep trying to wake him as time permits, and if we can devise some other approach to his condition. We also have that Surlymon captive and under observation in hopes of understanding better what happened. But for all we can tell, it is simply a Surlymon like every other Surlymon. There's nothing special about it, which makes us think that whatever strange thing happened to Hemlock Pine, it was purely a result of his peculiar makeup, his particular situation. It behooves us, therefore, to try and understand Hemlock himself a little better. Really, what else can we do? Crystal Burrell.
Would I say I was his girlfriend? Well, yes, I would. I mean, not always, but we were always friends. We founded Poke People together. We were inseparable. We met when we were both working at Mistress Masham's in the mall, and Hem was in charge of the Poke performance. They had a little routine they did where the Pokies would come out and dance on your table. I mean, various small Pokies, nothing large or unhygienic. All the food at Mistress Masham's was served under silver covers, and the Pokepets would whisk these away with a big flourish. Hem would come out with half a dozen Pokeballs, open them up, and set the Pokies going. I thought it was pathetic, and I told him so, and he confided in me that he was only in there as a saboteur. I thought he was kidding, trying to impress me. But no. One night right after we really got to talking, he went into his usual routine, but everything was different this time. He packed a bunch of wild Pokies into the balls, and he let them loose in the middle of a little kid's birthday party. The Pokies went crazy, eating up the food, tearing into presents, getting underfoot, and out of nowhere, Hem kept producing more and more Pokeballs, opening them up, setting them free. He was laughing, we were both howling, and the more freaked out everybody got, the more delighted Hem was. It seemed to feed the Pokies' frenzy. They were swinging from the light fixtures, smashing windows, breaking out into the streets. Oh, it was on the news that night and for days, and it was really the beginning of Hem's mystery. Because right after that, he disappeared. I didn't see him myself for months and months. It turned out he had made his first visit to the Poke Range.
Werner Herzog. Alone in the wild, Hemlock began to craft his own legend, fashioning himself into a creature as strange and colorful as the Pokepets he adored. Against a backdrop of untouched wilderness, he portrayed himself as an uncivilized man, fearless and ferocious, yet as sweet as the creatures he refused to capture. It was as if in liberating the Pokepets wherever he found them, he was setting free some caged part of himself.
Hemlock Pine. I used to just dabble in Pokepets. I captured and trained them like everyone else. I saw nothing but what was right in front of me. I never looked any deeper. And I was troubled. Our world, the world of people, is so shallow. It's just a thin coat of paint right on the surface. And that's enough for most people. The Pokies are colorful and cute and uncomplicated, and that's all they need to know. But this wasn't the truth. And without the truth, I wasn't making it. I needed the truth that was under all that. I did drugs. I drank. I lived a crazy, crazy life. Nobody knew me. I didn't know myself. I was drinking so much, doing so many drugs, it was destroying my mind. All the colors started to blur together. I couldn't tell Chickapork from Leomunk from a Swirlit. It was like when you mix all the colors of paint together and you just get a grayish, brownish gunk. And then one day, a flutter flute. I was drinking on the beach, out of my skull, and a flutter flute landed on the bottle just as I was about to take a swallow. Who knows, it might have been my last swallow. I might have drank that bottle and thrown it aside and walked out into the waves, and that would have been the end. But I watched that flutter flute there, getting in the way of my drink, and it looked at me and said, "Flutter flute." That's all. That's what they do. So simple. Just that beautiful, simple statement. Flutter flute. And something in me. I felt something emerge, as if from a chrysalis, bright and clear and strong, and I said, "Hemlock pine." Everything in my life was as simple as that. Hemlock pine. That is what I was, and it was enough. It was deep. And what that meant was everything else was deep, bottomless, and everything changed for me right then, right that very moment, saying myself back to that flutter flute. I say it a lot now. It saves me every day. Hemlock pine.
Werner Herzog with Crystal Burl. Now please explain to the viewers, Crystal, what it is you have here.
What I have here, Werner, is Hemlock's last recording, recovered from his campsite. The recording of the Surlyman.
Now, I understand there is some uncertainty whether the recorder was running already or whether it was turned on during the Surlyman's attack, and if so, whether it was Hemlock himself or the Surlyman that switched it on. But that doesn't really matter, does it? What matters is the contents of the tape, which you, I believe, have never listened to. Is that correct?
That is correct. Dr. Chrysolite said I had probably better not.
Dr. Chrysolite is a wise man, and you do well to listen to him, but his prohibition does not apply to me, so I'm going to listen to the recording now. The lens cap was never removed during the battle. I am just going to listen to the recording, if I have your permission to do so.
I give it, yes.
If you will please start the... There now, I hear wind, very loud, and something like a ripping sound, perhaps the 10th zipper. Actually, yes, it sounds as if the Surlyman is coming in range. I can hear it quite clearly saying its name over and over again. Surlyman. Surlyman. And now clearly I hear Hemlock much closer. Of course we know he had no Pokeballs and no other Pokies with him at the time. He is really alone against this creature. The Surlyman is saying again, Surlyman, Surlyman, and occasionally just Surly, as if it is too excited to say its full name.
They do that sometimes when they're excited, even add extra syllables.
And now Pine seems to have hit on a desperate strategy. He is saying his own name several times to the creature. It is almost as if they are having a conversation, like so. Surly, Surlyman. And Hemlock says Hemlock, Hemlock Pine, Hemlock. He's saying it again. And the Surlyman seems to be having none of it. Surlyman. Hemlock Pine. Surlyman. Surlyman. Hemlock Pine. Hemlock Pine. Hemlock. Surlyman. And now a terrible, terrible sound. You must never listen to this recording, Crystal.
That's what Dr. Chrysolite recommended as well, Werner.
Hemlock Pine. Hemlock Pine. Hemlock. Surlyman. And now I hear nothing but Surlyman. You must destroy this tape, Crystal. I think that is the only course of action.
I will, Werner. I will.
Surly. Surlyman. Surlyman. Surly.
Hemlock pine. We're here at the edge of the Pokepet Arena, deep in the Pokemaze. The Pokies have never allowed me this close before, but I think it is a sign of their acceptance, a sign of how far I've come that they're allowing me to set up my camera here overlooking the arena and film their battles in progress. Remember, these are entirely natural and unstaged. These are not like the Colosseum battles that human captors arrange, which go against the will and the inherent nature of the Pokepets. What you are seeing here is the source of humanity's watered-down, commercially driven arena battles. This, my friends, is the real shit. Now, it looks like a Skinnery is going into the arena, setting the first challenge. Skinnerys have 3 attacks: Wing Blast, Triplosion, and Tauntalon. This is a fairly good combination unless your Poke Nemesis happens to have natural resistance to more than one of these. Let's keep our fingers crossed. And now, it looks like... Yes, it's a Pyrovolp! Oh, this is going to be intense! Pyrovolps are extremely vulnerable to Tauntalon. Extremely. But if the little guy can get past the Skinnery's first attack, then things could get interesting. And it looks like Skinnery is rearing back, puffing up a little bit. Just look at those gorgeous chest feathers. Could be Tauntalon coming in first. But no. Wings going out, we've got a blast coming in, and Pyrovolp has got its head flame forward. This is a very bad move on Skinnery's part, and I think it's going to regret. Oh, would you look at that? Wing Blast has fed Pyrovolp's head flame. The whole Pokey is on fire, just burning up. This lets Pyrovolp bypass an entire part of its normal attack and go straight to Aura Flame. The only risk, and I'm not sure he knows it, is that Aura Flame can easily feed into Skinnery's own... Oh my god. Aura Flame, incredibly powerful and hot, has triggered Skinnery's innate Chirplosion. I am moving away from the arena, friends, because when this happens, the blast can spread far outside the... Whoa!
Werner Herzog. In his records, Hemlock speaks less and less of the human world. Civilization and its pleasures recede into the distant past, remembered only for its discontents. At the same time, the brilliant, colorful struggles of the Poképets, seeming so much simpler, become more and more a symbol for the conflict of his soul. Deeply torn, it is as if he battled himself in an arena of his own devising, but no longer a captor or trainer, without Poképets to do his fighting for him, every injury cut deep into his psyche.
Larchmont and Gladiolus Pine, Hemlock's parents. This is Hem's Poképet collection, much as he left it when he moved away from home. I'm afraid we encouraged him more than we should have, since he was a somewhat lonely boy and he got such pleasure from them. His first Poképet was a gift from my mother, who had an affinity herself with the little things.
I thought he won at a state fair throwing dimes in collie model bowls, or prize he won at school.
No, it was from my mother. I think he's still got the card in his room somewhere, pinned up on a bulletin board. We knew there wasn't much of a future in it, but that's not the sort of thing you can worry about when you just want your boy to be happy. But as he got older and we saw he wasn't moving on to other things, wasn't progressing, if you will, and we did start to get a bit worried. Somehow Hemlock found a way to make a living at it early on, doing his shows and trainings and whatnot. And although we were disappointed that he felt he had to move all the way to the other side of the country to pursue his interests, we did support him in it. It seemed like his pokey career was really taking him somewhere. Then, well, I don't know how much truth there is in this, but he tried out for the part of Bernie, the pokey trainer in Cheers, and according to him, he was the first in line for the part, but then Woody Harrelson tried out for the role and they gave it to him. Well, really, that was the beginning of the end for our boy.
He just sort of spiraled out of control.
I held it against Woody for a long time, but, well...
It's hard to keep a grudge against Woody Harrelson. He's a fine young man.
Crystal Burrell.
We used to go to the Poképet stores in the mall, and Hem would get really upset looking at them in captivity, and he always started about talking a Poképet Liberation Front. But that's not what Poke People is about or ever was about. Poke People allowed him to channel his frustration into something positive. You have to understand, the frustration turns so easily into anger. He could be the happiest, most joyful person you'd ever met, but the flip side of that was also there. He could be very dark at times. I know he felt that if he didn't have Pokies, he'd have gone to some very bad places with some very bad people. The Missile Kids, for instance. They tried to recruit him for a while, and I think he was attracted. They could be very seductive. You know, Minnie was a real minx, and Sal was sarcastic and cutting, but I know Hem respected them as trainers. And then that weird Pokey they had with them all the time, Feline. In the way that Hem could almost convince the Pokies that he was one of them, Feline had a bunch of us convinced that he was one of us. But though Hem flirted with the Missile Kids, he eventually came to believe they were on a bad path. I mean, certainly in terms of drugs, they were doing crazy things. I think even their Pokey was on amphetamines.
Hemlock Pine. If people knew, truly knew what wonderful creatures these Poképets are, they would consider, as I do, that to capture them, to try and train them, to force them through their tri-stage transformations at an accelerated pace, that all this goes against nature. Look at little Chickapork here. Just look at her. She is my hero. So sweet, so loving, so intelligent. Truly a hero. And to think that people want to put her in a ball and give her performance drugs and just dump her out in the Coliseum to battle against other Pokies that humans, fucking humans, declared her enemies. It's just sick. It makes me so angry because she's perfect. The lifestyle they live out here in the wild, it's perfect. I have learned so much from these creatures, but it's hardly the beginning of what we could all be learning from them. Our lives, there's something missing from them that these Pokies have mastered effortlessly. We need that thing. We don't even know what we're missing. But I'll tell you, it's something fucking huge. And without it, we're so far short of perfection it's not funny. That's why nobody's laughing. Isn't that right, little Chickapork?
Werner Herzog. As his differences with reality widened into a schism, Hemlock Pine fought reality with tooth and claw. If it did not fit his idealized view of nature, it was reality that must be bent and even broken to fit. His insistence that Pokepets held a deeper meaning does not stand up to scrutiny. Where Hemlock looked at the colorful creatures and saw inscrutable depths, I see only crisp lines, primary colors, two-dimensional expressions. Even this rhino phantom, which Pine in his writings calls a juggernaut of disaster, evokes in me no such premonition. It is just a cute, cuddly pet that has undergone completely ordinary metamorphosis into a brute that is dumb and awkward, yes, but completely without malice.
Hemlock Pine. What I found in the bushes here by the side of the river is something new to the Pokemaze. I would like you to study it with me. This is something we have to understand, but I'm not convinced we can. We are so good at missing the point. I discovered this earlier today, just after dawn, and I haven't touched the scene. I've just been waiting for it to get light enough to record. Now, in the night there was the sound of a Poke battle. This is rare enough, but not unheard of in midsummer. What is unusual is that it took place far from the arena and quite near my tent. Just a very weird sound of two Pokies calling back and forth to one another in solitary combat. I couldn't hear them clearly, but you can see now that they both cast exhausting spells on one another and, well, here they are. They show no signs of waking or getting along with their day. You can see the Porphyrops has been trampled down into the mud, and the Glumster is just lying with its eyes open, which is a strange position for an incapacitated Poke. I don't want to intrude in their natural cycle, but I've made some very gentle sounds and I've been getting progressively louder, trying to see if I can wake them gradually. But so far, no luck. I have to say, I feel very privileged to see this. To my knowledge, no Poke captor or trainer has ever observed this sort of behavior. I am the first. These are the sort of secret revelations the Pokies have granted me now that I've become such a part of their pattern of life. And these are exactly the things that I need to protect from the rest of the world.
Augustus Justice Peace. There were really no poachers in this area. The one exception might be the Missile Kids, Sal and Minnie, and their Poke mascot Feline. I don't believe they went up there to poach anyhow. A couple times we were concerned and apprehended them. There was no sign they'd been up to any actual Poke poaching. What they did do, I'm pretty certain, was show up to bother Hemlock Pine, tease him. They made a lot out of being his rivals, you know, and I'm sure it drove him nuts.
Hemlock Pine. I'm here at the shore. This is so upsetting. Here at the shore watching those fuckers. Those goddamn poachers, Sal and Minnie. I know what they're up to. They're rubbing my nose in it. That's what they're doing. They've come in to poach. Look at that boat full of Pokeballs. There's just no question they know I'm watching, even though I'm well hidden here. What kills me, fucking kills me, is that they have the full support of the Poke Park Service. It's criminal. It's so corrupt. The lesson here is that you just pay off the right people and you can come in and capture all the Pokeballs you want. Well, I'm not letting them get away with it. I think they can, but what's that? Do you hear that? They've turned their feline loose. This is just sick. It's perverted. They've trained their Pokepet to turn against its kind. This poor feline doesn't realize they're using it to lure in unsuspecting Pokepets, to pull them in where the missile kids can capture them. We're not gonna let them get away with that, no fucking way. Did you hear that? So much for them calling me paranoid. There's no mistaking that for a threat. The cruel thing is I can't even report them because I know they're here with the full knowledge of the Park Service. I can't believe I get grief for coming out here to protect these poor creatures while Minnie and Sal just waltz in, pack their Pokeballs full of innocent, defenseless Pokies. To think the Rangers would actually try to stop me from getting close to the pets. These guys... Sorry, I can't talk. It's making me too upset. I'm in tears over this.
Werner Herzog. Pine's disgruntlement became so great that he finally turned against the people who had given him the opportunity to work in the Pokemaze in the first place. His associates became in his mind implacable enemies. There is a sense in his final days of rage that he no longer saw anything beyond the picket of Pokies, among whom he counted himself, except as an homogeneous foe.
Hemlock Pine. Oh, I know who they are, all right. I know they set me up for this, those goddamn fucking motherfuckers. You know who you are, you fucking shithead mother cocksucking fucksuck fuckers. I'm out here trying to help these beautiful creatures while you're just swimming in corruption. You don't care a thing about preserving their environment. You people have sworn to protect it. You become the thing we have to protect it against. Motherfuck this. It's just not right. It's fucked. So very, 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 very fucked.
Crystal Burrell, Gust Masters, Peter Yelp.
We've come here today to honor him and to pray for him to wake up real soon. We don't understand what happened to him. What was different this time that he refuses to wake up? We were thinking that maybe if we came out here to a place that was dear to him, we'd have some insight. We'd get a glimpse of Hem's thinking. This right here is his favorite camping spot, where he'd come and spend the first part of the summer at the foot of the Poke Range before heading north into the maze. He chose this spot because it was right between two chickenpork dens. There's footage of him playing with the piglettas, and then of course when one of them made its second stage transformation into chickenpork, Hem and that Poke bonded real hard. It's been a year now, and those original Pokies have gone on and become Pecanaries and Boraxes. The ones grazing out there in the meadow, one of them might have been Hem's own chickenpork. I wonder if they miss him. I sure do.
Werner Herzog. The irony of Hemlock's last trip is not lost on anyone who looked at his life. As the days of fall grew shorter, he left the maze as he always did, with no desire to return to civilization, but knowing he could not make himself comfortable among the hibernating and overwintering Pokies. However, an encounter with an airport Pokepet vending machine, in which Hemlock tried to buy the freedom of every captive Pokepet but soon ran out of quarters, sent him rebounding from the crass commercial exploitation of his beloved Pokies straight back into the wilderness. Returning to the maze later than ever before, he found his familiar environment had been altered by advancing chill, and his familiar Poke friends had moved on their migratory routes, while new creatures moved into the maze to overwinter there, creatures such as the Surly Man.
Hemlock Pine. I'm back, friends. I didn't know I would be doing this, obviously, and I would not recommend it to anyone else, but frankly, I find it exhilarating. I am overjoyed to be back here. The longer I can put off dealing with the fucking human world, the happier I'll be. And you know what? This is a part of the Poke life cycle I have never seen. This is a learning moment. I've never been here in the winter, and although I won't be staying for the whole season, I will certainly see more of it than any person ever has. Because no other person, trainer, captor, or civilian has stayed even this long. Who knows what I'll learn? What wonders await?
Werner Herzog. Toward the end of the process of compiling this account, we received access to Pine's final recordings. Here we see him with a large, grouchy Pokepet that almost certainly is the Surly Man that finished him off. Of most interest in these studies is that this Poke appears to have changed radically sometime between the date this footage was taken and the time of its capture by the Poke Rangers. Experience gained in a battle is the usual mode by which Pokies gain sufficient energy to transform into their morpheme, and it is hard not to conclude that it was the battle with Hemlock Pine that caused this Surlimon to undergo its third transformation. Most confusing to Pokeologists is that while its form changed dramatically, its name and its song remained the same, Surlimon. Here, Hemlock records the untransformed Surlimon stalking the maze in an endless search for amusement. He seems to be searching this simple creature for a deeper meaning, but whatever it is eludes him as it eludes us.
Hemlock Pine. I don't know what this Pokey wants. Superficially, it seems to be looking for food and interested in nothing else, but there is something the Pokies have, something innate in them which draws me. I feel sometimes so close to them, I almost have a name for it, one I could express to myself, but which might be impossible to communicate to others. There's something there.
Werner Herzog. But here I must disagree with Hemlock Pine. The cute cartoon features, so simplistic and round and bright, need evoke nothing beyond the simplest emotional connotations associated with their coloration. He looks for depth where none exists. The Pokies have no secrets and nothing to teach us. If anything, this is their entire lesson. They mean nothing, and nothing about their relationship with us is real.
Jasper Chrysolite. If I open this door and pull out the tray, you can see the desperate effort we have undertaken to keep Hemlock comfortable in spite of the bizarre process that seems to be having its way with him. Here you see his head, the eyes still closed in an attitude of sleep that for all intents and purposes seems permanent. Here his hand, somewhat distressed after its short stay in Surlimon's mouth. The torso, on which the head hardly fits at this point, part of a leg. The other parts, all gathered from the maze, do not quite add up completely. But this still seems the sort of risk Hemlock stated repeatedly he was willing to take to be one with these creatures, to learn the lessons they carried with them. Lessons, perhaps, that may one day apply to us as we share their natural world. Hemlock Pine. I know I've felt something like this before, but the shortness of the season sharpens this sense of giving. I have the words now. They've given them to me. I owe the Pokepets everything I have. Everything. And I owe them completely. I would die for these creatures. I would die for these creatures. I would die for these creatures.
Werner Herzog. We still have no idea what he means.
Property of Digito of America.